Well, hello everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Law Chat, the monthly series of interviews with luminaries from the legal services sector offering ideas and inspiration. I'm Simon Tupman. I'm the convener and host of Law Chat, which is brought to you again this month in association with Moore Markhams, providing unique and specialist financial services to the legal profession. My guest today qualified as an accountant in 1984 with KPMG. He then went on to become the founder of the Verasage Institute, which is a think tank aimed at educating professionals on how to better capture and create value in their practices, especially by pricing on purpose. He has gone on to write 7 bestsellers, including one over my shoulder here, Pricing on Purpose, and also The Firm of the Future, which has been on my library's bookshelf for several years, and was a game changer for me when I first read it. And Ron is going to be talking today about The Firm of the Future version 2. My guest has been named as one of the most influential people in the accounting profession, having been named twice by Accounting Today as one of the top 10 influencers in the world. Today, my guest joins us from his home in California. Ron Baker, welcome, and thank you for joining us here on Law Chat.
Oh, Simon, thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Terrific. How have you been since we last met, which was several years ago, I think at an ALTMA function in Melbourne?
Well, with COVID, it took me off the road, so gave me some downtime. That was kind of fun, but had to make the pivot, like I'm sure we all did, to more virtual meetings. And as we were talking before we went live, I'm just thrilled that we have equipment like Zoom that we're able to do things like this and stay connected, at least at some level.
Absolutely. Well, you're looking well, and you were telling me in the warm-up to this chat that it's been pretty warm in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, in the 90s. It's a little cooler today and yesterday, but yeah, it's been hot. But that's to be expected here in June.
I bet. Well, I guess things are also hotting up in the professions around the world, but particularly in the legal services sector too. I guess as a result of two probably seismic events in the last 13 years. We've had the global financial crisis, and then, of course, more recently, COVID-19 and the implications of both of those seem to have accelerated a lot of arguably much needed change in the legal profession. I'd be interested in your points of view in terms of how you think COVID has impacted on professional service firms, but importantly also from the law firm's perspective, what you think some of the longer term implications might be.
I think we have seen pockets of innovation coming out of COVID. I mean, firms that, had to, and I don't like the term remote work because work is, not a place we go. It's just something we do. But they've pivoted to remote work. And I think it'll be really interesting to see if that continues because lawyers, like all professionals, we're knowledge workers. We're not tied to a certain location. So we shouldn't be hemmed in by, having to commute an hour to an office or whatever. Should be able to work anywhere we desire. So I hope that trend sticks. And I think one of the things that's done, Simon, is it's forced firms to think more about outputs, measuring their people on outputs, not that I have to see you in your cubicle, working for 8 hours. Otherwise, I have no idea what you're doing. No, I just need to judge your outputs. And I hope that mindset sticks. Because that's what I've been arguing forever is we need to look at outputs, not inputs.
And I guess you must have observed in the last 20 years a shift in thinking amongst leaders of law firms and professional service firms generally, away from the input argument to more of the outcome and output argument. The idea of firms being much more client or customer focused or centric.
I hope so. At least the ones I know of that do value pricing, I believe they are, because value pricing forces you to have that outcome discussion even before you start your work. I mean, because it's not necessarily based on transactional or selling services. It's based on providing an outcome to your customer. So just like an example, I just read about a Nordic company that started subscription business model in eye care. So you subscribe to this outfit, and you get an eye exam once a year, and you get all your glasses updated, and it's all part of the package. And if you think about that for a minute, they're not selling the eye exam with the doctor. They're not selling the glasses and the frames and all of that. They're selling perfect vision. And that's focusing on the outcome. Everybody told them this model will never work in this industry. It's too old. It's too staid. It's too mature. They have 240,000 active subscribers.
Amazing. So what are the opportunities for law firms in this field?
I think they're huge. I remember reading an ABA article, and this was about 2 years ago, that profiled, it was close to 20 firms, and they were all they were sole proprietors, smaller firms, maybe two partners that offered a subscription-based model. And they were all different practice areas, some estate, some were, family law, and all of those things. And I think those firms are really thriving. Plus, we also have seen through COVID, because of the lockdowns, the most resilient businesses across all economies have been the subscription business models, because they've been very resilient. They're the only ones that have really had some tremendous growth, not just a lack of decline, but actual really good growth in the market in the last year and a half. And that's substantial because it just makes your business more resilient.
So anyone tuning into this who is listening to the idea of a subscription model, and they are a firm that's perhaps run along traditional lines, they're still billing by the hour and selling time for their inputs rather than the outcome for clients, what would you say to them about the opportunities that they're potentially missing out on?
Something very encouraging. I think in some respects, it's easier to move from hourly billing, jump over value pricing, what I call value pricing 1.0 for purposes of this, and move right into value pricing 2.0, which is the subscription business model. First off, you don't have the legacy, the mindset, some of the unlearning that you have to do if you were in value pricing 1.0. So kind of like the developed world, they didn't have the telephone structure, so they were able to leapfrog right into cellular technology. It's the same type of shift. So there are no constraints on moving to this model. And I think in some respects, firms that are stuck with hourly billing could make this change faster than you can moving from hourly billing to value pricing 1.0.
Do you think that nevertheless, as part of their evolution, it is still worthwhile for them to not make the leap, to still delve into value pricing?
Well, there's going to be some tenets of value pricing 1.0 that are still critical, because we look at the value. The difference between hourly billing and value pricing 1.0 was hourly billing prices the inputs, the efforts, the activities, whereas value pricing 1.0 priced the customer. I preached forever, and all those books that you talked about, price the customer. It's value subjective. Every customer is different. But value pricing 2.0 is a little bit different because the value is embedded in the firm's branding, its positioning, its strategy, its customer selection process, and its value proposition. So rather than pricing the customer, in value pricing 2.0, you are pricing the relationship and the portfolio of customers. And when people hear that for the first time, they think I'm playing a semantical game. They say, well, what's the difference between pricing the customer and pricing the relationship? Big difference, because in subscription, the relationship is at the center of the business model. You're actually monetizing the relationship, not a series of transactions, not a series of services. You're monetizing that relationship, and that's the big, big difference.
So I know that some law firms have introduced a bit of a subscription model. Sometimes they use a different name like membership. Is this model better suited to those firms who are offering services at business customers or in-house counsel? Or do you feel that this is an opportunity for small or mid-sized firms who are offering services for mums and dads?
Oh, I think it works for both B2B and B2C. I mean, LegalZoom in their public offering filing mentioned subscription 275 times in their IPO filing. And that's because the market is screaming at businesses of all kinds that we value businesses that have annual recurring revenue more than we value businesses that are transactional based. And to some extent, value pricing 1.0 is still transactional based. You still have to figure out a scope of work. And, if you diverge from that scope, there could be change requests and you have to go to the Department of Paperwork and, get a change order filed in triplicate and signed off by everybody. With subscription, it's just like, no, if we're capable of doing it and you pick a plan where that particular need is covered, then you're covered.
But presumably, as part of this, you would need to scope it out very, very carefully, wouldn't you, the benefits of subscription?
Yes. And that scoping, again, I think it takes place at the strategy and positioning level, not so much at the customer level. So, for example, we interviewed a guy, John Tubin, who has a law firm. It's an IP law firm, Counsel for Creators. And he's got a subscription-based model. It's like $95 a month. And that gives them the first point of access to him. So they can talk to him, have meetings, unlimited. They just set $95 a month. Now, if they need other things, they need trademark, if they need business entity selection, those types of other issues, he charges, basically VP 1.0. So he's kind of got a hybrid model, but the way into that firm, the only way into that firm is you've got to be a subscriber. Matthew Burgess from View Legal also runs on this type of a model, and he does estate planning. I think it's easier with subscription, just like it's easier with value pricing 1.0 to be niched, specialized, because that tells you who your sweet spot customer is. You can't be all things to all people. I don't think you can be that in any type of business, whether it's hourly billing, VP 1.0 or 2.0. I think you have to really have a strategy, and having a strategy means putting yourself in a box. I think law firms, all professional firms, are defined by the customers they don't have and the services they don't provide. And that puts you in a box. And a lot of firms or firm managers, leaders are very uncomfortable with that because they feel like they're giving up revenue. But the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to be all things to all people, that's a prescription for disaster in a very lackluster, non-dynamic business.
Some interesting thoughts, and absolutely. And as you're saying that to me, Ron, I'm thinking of some of the firms that I've worked with in the past who are legal businesses, have been around for many years. They may be somewhat entrenched in the way they do business because it's less risky. This is the way we've been used to doing things for a number of years. We are financially successful. The CEO might say, look, I've read Ron's books and I understand the arguments in favor of value pricing 1.0, but making that transition from what they do today to either 1.0 or 2.0 could be problematic. In your experience, is introducing a subscription model easier for a startup as opposed to a firm that's been operating for many years?
That's a great question, Simon. I think it is easier for a startup. In fact, a lot of firms that dabble or want to really experiment with subscription will actually set up a different business unit. And we even saw that to some extent with value pricing, just moving from hourly to value pricing 1.0. Some firms actually separated and created a new entity to do it because it eventually cannibalized the old hourly billing. Because you get those legacy systems, mindsets, your dashboards, everything you measure, the entire culture of an hourly billing firm is built around inputs. But the entire culture of any type of subscription business, whether you're talking about Disney Plus or Netflix or you pick it, is built around the customer relationship. That relationship is at the center, and it breaks down bureaucracy. It breaks down silos. For instance, at Netflix, there are no individual KPIs at Netflix. Can you imagine telling that to a law firm partner? That we don't track your book of business, we don't track your realization, your utilization, and no, because it all rolls up into lifetime customer value at the company level. And that's what we're monitoring because we're taking a portfolio approach of profitability. We're not worried about profit by job, by customer, by hour. We're worried about profit across the entire portfolio. But more importantly, we're worried about lifetime value of that customer. And if you can get a subscriber to subscribe to your firm for 1 year, you have a 90% chance of keeping them for life. And that's going to make your business sell at a higher multiple if you ever do go to sell it, make it much more valuable in the marketplace to a potential buyer because of that annual recurring revenue. So it's just a completely different mindset. And I don't know, it's a very difficult thing, especially in accounting, to change that mindset. Costs are tangible. We can track costs. We know exactly what they are to the penny, but lifetime customer value kind of has to be predicted and modeled, so we don't pay as much attention to it. We focus way too much on the math of the moment. I got to charge for every phone call, every copy, everything turns into a profit center. You can't do that in a subscription model.
So in your view and your experience, Ron, who are the firms who are having most success with adopting this new model?
Well, we haven't seen a lot of traction in this yet. We're still, I believe, if you look at that diffusion curve that everybody talks about, in Jeffrey Moore's book, I think it's Crossing the Chasm, where you have the 2.5% that are the innovators. They're the ones that just glom on to new technology, new ideas, new models, whatever it might be. Then you move into the early adapters at 13.5% of the population. And then you start to break out into the early majority, which is 34%. And of course, there's a late majority of 34%. And then there's laggards of 16% that, they're still using a rotary phone type of thing. I would say value pricing 1.0, we're solidly in the early majority. We've cracked that. I think that debate's over. I refuse to debate people now about hourly billing. To me, it's dead. It's buried. We just, people that are still using it just don't know that it's obsolete. In terms of subscription, we're now way back on the left side of that diffusion curve in that 2.5%. There's one firm I know about of Indiana called Summit CPA, who went from $600,000 when he started, I believe, in 2004. Today, he's over $7 million. And he says, I owe it all to subscription.
Wow. So Summit CPA, obviously an accounting firm. Would you say that accountants, in spite of the difficulties in wrapping their heads around this issue, would you say accountants are probably more ahead on to the left-hand side of the innovation curve compared with lawyers?
That's a great question, because there's some incredibly innovative lawyers. Again, I wish I had that ABA article, and I'll try and find it for you, so maybe you can put it in the show notes or something. But they profiled these 15 or 20 firms, and I remember reading it thinking, this is really cutting edge. I mean, this is a brand new model. And John Tobin from Council for Creators is doing some really interesting stuff. He wants tens of thousands of members. So it is definitely, it's as scalable as you want it to be. And I do think that we're going to see more innovation towards this. There's no doubt in my mind, this is the future of professionalism, professional firms. If I had to rewrite the Firm of the Future 2.0 today with Paul Dunn, it would be around the subscription model. I wouldn't even talk about value pricing 1.0.
Interesting. And just one other thought aligned with that. Do you think that one of the hurdles in making this transformation or transition is the regulatory body that might be governing lawyers, bar councils, law societies?
No, I think this is where lawyers have an enormous advantage over CPA firms, at least at the high end of town. Like the big four accounting firms, the top 100 accounting firms in any country, they do a lot of audits. And from what I'm told, you can't have your customers subscribe to the firm if you do audits, because it impairs independence. That's what the AICPA and other professional bodies have told me. So I think it's going to be really, really difficult for the big firms to do that. But now most CPAs don't offer audits. And as far as I know, and John Chisholm and Matthew Burgess can chime in on this as well, but there are no restrictions on a similar kind in the legal space. So I think, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to do this.
Yeah, I know there's a New Zealand firm in Auckland called Legal Vision that has a form of subscription for their business clients. So I would imagine if somebody's already doing it here, there's no reason why others shouldn't do this either. But it does raise the question, do you think are so many firms still attached to the notion of billing by the hour? Do you think it's a risk issue, or do you think they're intellectually lazy?
I think, the economist Herbert Simon has a great word that he coined, satisficing, which is a combination of sufficient and satisfy. And you know what? Hourly billing is good enough. Some of these firms are making $1 million per partner. And as I think Daniel Susskind says, it's very difficult to get millionaires to change their business model, right? And it's good enough. The question is it sustainable? And if you want to eventually at some point sell the firm, then the market is telling you right now that annual recurring revenue firms are much more valuable. I mean, they're going for multiples way above 1x revenue. We're seeing multiples of 7 to 10 to 12 in professional firms that have annual recurring revenue. I'll just give you one example really quick. Jeff Bezos, CEO and founder of Amazon, just invested $300 million into Pilot, a startup accounting firm with about 1,000 customers. Based on that investment, that firm is valued at $1.2 billion, billion with a B. There is no way that makes them number 8 in terms of revenue. If you figure 1x revenue, that would make them number 8 in the United States size firm. That's an amazing evaluation. Now, you can argue it's overvalued, but what you can argue is that the market values annual recurring revenue businesses much more than transactional based businesses.
Very interesting, and particularly for people in the Southern Hemisphere who may not know that latest piece of data. I wonder if I could ask you a little bit too, Ron, about the VeraSage Institute. The last 20 years, you have influenced over 250,000 professionals around the world. Probably that's a conservative estimate, and your work with Paul Dunn, I guess, has had a significant role in changing the mindset of a lot of practitioners, some of whom I've met who were adamant that there was no such thing as an alternative way to bill clients other than by the hour. And a day with Baker and Dunn might have completely changed their attitude towards the way of the world and changed their lives profoundly. And I think there are one or two people who have been disciples and followers of your work who are tuned in today. Tell us a little bit about VeraSage today and its members. Is it still very active in advocating the latest value pricing 2.0?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm obviously a big proponent of it. Some of our fellows have issues with it. They're still getting their heads around it. And I understand that. It's something that warps your mind. It should make you uncomfortable. There's a great quote from some physicist, I forget who it was, but he said, if a new idea doesn't scare you, it's probably not worth a whole lot. And that's kind of how I feel where we are with this value pricing 2.0 model. It is scary. There are things we have to work out. To me, this is the new renaissance, Simon. I feel like I'm in the Wild West in the gold rush period in California, because we're seeing just a rut. I can't keep up with the number of subscription businesses out there being started. And we're learning new things every single day about this model. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm absolutely convinced that this is going to be the future of the professions. Now, just like the future with value pricing 1.0, we're not done yet there. We're still working on that 34% early majority. But as far as I'm concerned, I slid back to the left side of that curve, and I want to play with the innovators in this new model. I want to be the pioneer who takes the arrows.
That's very exciting. I want to ask you too, and I hope it's not inappropriate, but are you and Paul likely to do a revamped version of this 2.0?
Yes, we've been talking about that. As a matter of fact, I have a meeting with our publisher tomorrow to discuss that exact idea. So I'm looking forward to what they think about it. But I'd be very excited, because if anybody has heard Paul Dunn, he has got some incredible content that he's pushed out in the last 10 years or so around purpose and, leaving a legacy. And it's a perfect tie-in to subscription, because look, everybody on this call and everybody who's going to listen to this, you became a lawyer because you wanted to help people. You didn't become a lawyer because you wanted to bill the most hours or work at the office the longest. You wanted to help people. And just like doctors in this country, Simon, and this might not translate to everybody, but doctors over here are starting concierge doctor practices or direct primary care, which are subscription based. And one of the things that happens is they go from 3,500 patients down to 600, sometimes even less. And The reason is they say, I became a doctor to help people, and I can't do that if I'm spending 4 minutes with you. I have 40 appointments booked back to back, and half of those 4 minutes I spent, looking at the computer screen, typing into your electronic health record. These doctors are there to take care of anything you need, not just to get you healthy when you're sick, but to keep you healthy. And in my mind, that's exactly what lawyers do, and that's exactly what accountants do. So I think the parallels between concierge medicine, which, by the way, started in 1996, that book behind you there, Pricing on Purpose, actually talks about the first concierge medical practice that was formed in 1996 called MD Squared. And he realized, this is why I went into medicine. This is the legacy I want to leave. I want to help people. I don't want to bounce from customer to customer and not have an impact. And Paul Dunn has done some great work on that recently. So combine that with subscription, and I think you have a powerful firm of the future 2.0.
Very exciting and inspiring stuff. I wonder if I can go back to some basics, Ron, in the last 5 minutes. So somebody's watching this or listening to this saying, I've not heard of Ron Baker before, or Paul Dunn. Our firm talks loosely about whether we're charging enough. Where do we start? Is it with a conversation in the partnership boardroom about educating ourselves to these issues? Can they download articles from VeraSage's website? Where would you say they're best to start? Even reading the book over my shoulder. There it is. Yeah.
Right. There's lots of content out there, and there's many more pricing consultants out there, some better than others, obviously. They can go to verasage.com. They can read trailblazer case studies of firms of all different professionals, sectors that have made this transition. They can go and find me on LinkedIn, and I'm one of the influencer bloggers. I've got 100 plus articles up there. They can also go to my radio show, the Soul of Enterprise.com, where they can hear shows that are devoted to one topic, usually, whether it's value pricing or subscription, or interviews with people like John Tobin and Matthew Burgess and John Chisholm and others. So there's lots of content out there. I think the thing is, you got to commit to it, and you probably need some guidance, some coaching. So, go find John Chisholm and his group, Innovim in Australia. Those guys that do that, they've been helping firms make this transition for a long time, and they can really help firms make the transition with less mistakes and in quicker time.
Yes, I'm sure that there are a lot of great people out there, and I would encourage, of course, anyone who's looking at making important changes like this and being part of the Renaissance, as you refer to it, to take full advantage of those people, because there are, of course, a lot of good people and a lot of good information out there. Final word with you, Ron, before we close it down for today. Any specific advice for law firm leaders out there? At the moment, they're juggling lots of balls. They're trying to find an equilibrium for their people in terms of work-life balance, in terms of adopting new technologies. Where on the list should this issue of pricing be? Down the ladder or right at the top?
I think it's right at the top, because if you're talking about changing a business model, pricing is the quickest thing you can do to have the biggest impact on your profits right away. It's the fastest thing you can implement. And I would start with pricing, whether it's just a move to value pricing 1.0, or if you want to try and move into value pricing 2.0, but really business model innovation. Now, that's a big topic. There's a lot of strategy. It might redo your positioning, your marketing, your value proposition. A lot of firms that made the transition from hourly to value pricing 1.0 ended up shedding practice groups, because again, you're defined by the services you don't provide, and we can't be all things to all people. So they actually shed practice groups, just like concierge doctors shed patients. They go from 3,000 to 600 or whatever. And when you do that, you can have deeper and more impactful relationships with your customers, because that's really why we became professionals. We want to help people, whether it's in business, whether it's professionally or personally, and we can do that if we can develop deep and strong relationships. Because Simon, as you know, with a relationship, there's only two things that are happening in all relationships. They're either growing or they're dying. And the great thing about the subscription model is it puts that relationship at the center of the business. It puts it right on your dashboard, right on your income statement. You're watching your annual recurring revenue and your lifetime value growing over time. You're paying attention to what matters. You're not in the weeds of tracking time on this job and that job and all this bureaucracy that creates zero value. You're actually growing those relationships every single day and making a huge impact. And that's why we're all professionals, in my opinion.
Terrific. Hear, hear. Thank you for those words of advice and insight, Ron. It's been a great honor having you on Law Chat today. I really appreciate your thoughts, and some of the comments coming in on the chat box indicate they've been appreciated too. So on behalf of all our viewers and listeners today, thanks very much for coming on, and appreciate your input. Good luck with that new book, and perhaps when it's out, we'll have another chat. But
beautiful.
Great pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Simon. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.